Hey guys, Youngblood with you for your Should You Buy video on the new Drake Ironclad. The Ironclad is a concept ship, meaning that it is in development and not flight ready, first debuting with the Drake DefenseCon event this year, but it is being labeled as a heavy freighter. The Ironclad is a fairly expensive ship with a price tag at $400 war bond, meaning that you're throwing all new money into the game but you're getting LTI. Or for a standard sale where you can use your account credits for this, it's $450. But with the ILW event currently taking place, that sale actually comes with 10-year insurance instead of the normal 6-month, which is about as good as LTI. In addition to the heavy freighter, they also are offering a heavy dropship variety called the Ironclad Assault, which has a price point of $465 war bond or $535 standard sale, also with 10-year insurance. So before we can talk about if I would recommend purchasing an Ironclad or not, let's break down what we know about the ship a little bit further. The Ironclads are both about the same size and based on mostly the same hull, with a hull length of 120 meters. It's 52 meters wide and 20 meters tall, which if you're looking for a size comparison, it's about as long as a Carrack while being a little bit more narrow and shorter. Both the Ironclad and the Assault are labeled as having a crew of 6, but I'm imagining they can be operated with less somewhat effectively, while I think things are much different in the Assault. Where the cargo-focused freighter variant has a total crew of 6, with indicated stations being pilot, co-pilot, 2 remote turrets, and 2 manned turrets, the Assault shares some of that with pilot, co-pilot, but it has 4 remote turrets, 2 manned turrets, and in addition, you also have jump seats for 34 passengers to be able to support a ground operation. The ship itself looks very reminiscent of a Caterpillar, but also with some flair of the Crucible from Anvil. The design is super Drake. Based in practicality, you have a very bare-bones ship that is rugged with exposed padding and wiring. You have tighter corridors that don't provide the luxury of space, but like with all other Drake ships, it feels like how, a real space ship may actually come to life. The ship is basically made up of a few different areas on board. The first of which is the accommodation area in the rear of the ship, where you have things like kitchen, sleeping quarters, etc. Also in the rear of the ship is your engineering bay with access to all of the components, and some visible engine pieces are present that you'll work around. The most substantial, roughly 2/3 of the ship, is consisted of the cargo area, where on the freighter you have 1,536 SCU of cargo, which places it somewhere in the space between something like the Caterpillar, which is about 600 SCU, and the much larger carrying capabilities of something like a Hull C. On the Assault version, you do lose some of that cargo room to make space for a repair facility in the rear of the ship, where I think you will be able to work on things like vehicles and components and items, but it hasn't really been specified just really in what you can actually fix in there yet. But repair is not really in the game yet anyways, so maybe they just don't know how that's going to come to life yet. Gaining that repair facility will reduce your overall cargo capacity to 1,152 on the Assault, but every vehicle that you place in there will reduce the ability to haul cargo even further. Even with that being said, 1152 is still about what you get from 2 full Caterpillar loads, so it's a big hauler as well. Looking at the freighter version, it was designed to make cargo loading easy in a couple different ways. The more traditional means of cargo loading in your large front ramp, the door drops for cargo loaders to wheel it up and on board. There's also enough room to hold where you can use the ramp to facilitate boarding different vehicles. And if they are small enough to not impact that carrying ability, you do end up having a small covered vehicle area in the rear of the cargo hold. Beyond the ramp to load, there's also an armored retractable roof that allows for cargo to be loaded on from top down into the cargo bay. It seems that is mostly designed to be used in space, taking advantage of a couple tractor beams to manage the ship-to-ship loading and unloading. But if you're parked somewhere that has a large cranes or something like that, I would imagine that that would be an efficient way to be able to manage this on the ground as well. The flexibility in loading cargo provides a fair amount of value in my mind, and that flexibility honestly probably extends well beyond the traditional cargo hauling profession. Think maybe one that gets a little less honest. Something where you're liberating cargo from a third party and completing that delivery on your own. But maybe you don't cut them in on the profits. And maybe they're dead. I'm talking about piracy, and if you haven't figured that out yet. Navigating cargo from one ship to another with handheld tractor beams can be finicky at best and difficult to impossible depending on the entry point in the ship that you're trying to get it to. Considering in piracy you're often on the clock and you have a ship-based tractor beams and huge roof that opens, ease and efficiency should be on your side, and combining that with the Ironclad allegedly being well armored, you probably have a decent amount of fortitude to be able to stay in place. That roof also has another value if the facilities and the space-based, or if you're kind of have that overhead crane. But my thoughts here is that if you have cargo buried in the middle of your cargo hold that you need to get off the ship, in traditional completely enclosed ships, you would need to clear a path by moving a bunch of different boxes. But it is possible that with this layout that you may be able to pull what you need from really wherever it is. And the last call out would be, and probably relevant against piracy, is the armored or locking secured cargo area in the rear of the cargo space, which has individual cages that require access to enter that. So if somebody has intentions of taking what is in there, it would likely take time to damage or hack as opposed to just grabbing your cargo and leaving with it. Overlooking the cargo hold are two areas to discuss. The first being that there are gantries that run the length of the cargo hold near the roof on both sides, running front to back. Much like with the Caterpillar, it helps you just to navigate the ship without having to deal with huge stacks of cargo boxes. But they also call out that this would be a great vantage point in case someone is attempting to stow away on the ship, or if they are boarding you in a boarding party, it allows you to get better sight line with some level of protection to be able to fire down should you need to. The other overlooked position is a bit more practical in nature, which is the command deck, not to be confused with the command module. The command deck is overlooking the cargo hold and has stations to operate various engineering stations or turrets, but is also where the controls for the tractor beam are, in an advantageous position to see what you're doing. You cannot fly the ship from the command deck, so I think it's really more of an operations hub versus a traditional bridge. Speaking of flying the ship, that is completed within the command module of the ship, which is docked to the rear port side of the ship, which is directly taken from the Caterpillar. And much like with the Caterpillar, the module can disconnect and be used as an escape craft if things are getting a little too dodgy, and maybe you need to leave your cargo behind in exchange for your life. With insurance and death of a spaceman mechanics coming at some point, the ability to live to see the next day will eventually be pretty important. They claim that the module is not intended to be used as a snub, but didn't really give any context into why that would be the case. The module has a shield, it's got seats for a pilot, co-pilot, comms agent, navigator, and 6 additional jump seats. It has 2 weapons on a size 2 turret, and the strangest call out of all is that it has a quantum drive. This feels much more comprehensive, like a snub, than a true escape craft. So unless there is some arbitrary blocker, like a seal gets broken and it can't reattach, or if they're just trying to say that, hey, you're leaving your bigger ship unattended and it's not able to move, we'll kind of need to feel that out later. There are a few entry points into the ship, with one being on the command module. You could enter through the front ramp. There's a docking collar, and I have to imagine there will end up being an elevator somewhere on this ship at some point. The Ironclad Assault is really very similar at the core, with some small adjustments that helped suit it better to that dropship role. Where the freighter has 4 turrets, the Assault has 6, with additional ones placed on the underside of the ship to help with hovering above the area and raining fire. I believe those turrets have 4 weapons on them instead of 2. And it also helps to provide some covering fire for the exit points for the vehicles that are going to be exiting the ship. It allegedly has a redesigned front ramp area to enable the tank to be able to enter and exit the ship, which is the biggest vehicle in the game. I don't know that that actually would be different between the 2 variants, so I'm almost expecting to see that the actual freighter version has the same entry point, but it's a call out that it was mentioned. The cargo area has been shortened to provide space for that aforementioned repair bay, which reduces your overall SCU by about 500. The internal storage from Concepts appears to give space up to be able to hold about 4 Nova tanks, which honestly means a ton of room in there for a bunch of varieties of other vehicles, or really just some combinations of vehicles and cargo. What we don't know with any certainty is if the cargo hold actually has the opening roof that the freighter version has on the Assault, because it's never mentioned. In addition to that, it never actually calls out if the Assault version has the tractor beams that the other variant has. So how much has actually been sacrificed from the freighter to the Assault is a little bit of an unknown right now, which makes it a little bit harder to make a recommendation on whether you should actually buy it, because we know less information about it. But we'll just have to wait and see. My assumptions on this is that it's going to be kind of a lumbering beast, both of these variants, with very low maneuverability, with medium speed at best. It does have 10 main thrusters, which is a lot. And then you also have the VTOL thrusters that will pivot and provide that additional rearward thrust, but none of them really seem like massive engines. So I would say that while maneuverability is almost certainly low, the speed end up could surprising us, but I wouldn't really count on it being fast. The closest comps for the Ironclad to me would probably be like the C2 Hercules, the Carrack, or maybe even the Hull C. And honestly, even so, none of those are particularly close. The C2 is much more modern ship that provides the ability to carry 2 Nova tanks and about 700 SCU of cargo. So the Ironclad just operates at an entirely different scale. Yet probably less efficient in fuel and being a less responsive, and kind of read that as fun ship to fly. The Caterpillar, which I didn't mention before, is almost a step down from this and doesn't really get into the vehicle transportation game, so you don't really compare to that. The Carrack provides medbay facilities that the Ironclad doesn't do, and it does have an on-top dedicated snub hangar, while the Ironclad may need to rely on the front ramp for, snub loading or potentially the command module, or, depending on whether the actual, hangar roof can open. The Ironclad also just brings a lot more cargo and vehicles to the party, while both the Carrack and Ironclad have some degree of repair facility. My hunch is that the Ironclads is just going to be more complete based on scale. And then finally, the Hull C doesn't do vehicles, and it carries cargo on the exterior, and it doesn't land on planets when it's loaded. So it's not really close either, especially when you consider that it almost quadruples the SCU carried on the Ironclad. So I think if you're saying, should you pick the Ironclad over another ship, is a hard conversation to have based on there not really being a direct competitor in unknown information at this point. For example, could you fly with the roof open and operate like a small carrier ship? I guess probably yes, but I would guess your overall durability probably plummets because you don't have that armored door there. It does make me wonder how much of a competitor this will be for the Liberator, though, which has dedicated landing zones and landing sites and that sort of stuff. I'm inclined to say that this should be somewhat capable of handling similar jobs, but with the lack of specialization and conversation about that, the experience in doing so for ground vehicles is probably going to be clunkier and less effective if it even is an option. So overall, should you buy the Drake Ironclad? I think if you're looking into a larger ship, one that can sort of be your base of operations or allow you to do a lot of different things at a large scale without having to earn up to that in the game, then yeah, I think the price tag on this, while being admittedly high, is actually something that I see as a pretty good value for the scale of the operation and the options that the ship opens up to do, like cargo and piracy and ground transport and repairing and potentially other ship transport, plus really anything else that involves having protected large areas internally. You can kind of check a lot of boxes. I see value to something like this in Pyro, as larger ships have generally larger ranges and the ability to carry other things will be, a critical supporting role there. I personally feel like the value on the Ironclad is greater than on the Assault version, and I think that dropship operations will never be as prevalent as space cargo, and the base version can still do drop work. So for me, yeah, the Ironclad is just going to be the better bet. It's going to be the more common purchase than the Assault. So overall, yeah, I feel like if the money is right for you and you feel like the ship is right, it really just comes down to how it does the job, and if the price is something that you're comfortable with. But what I am personally comfortable with is what the ship itself is and the value that it will provide into the game. So if you have questions or honestly competing opinions, please get them into the comments. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more coming soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day and take care.